Okay, hello everyone. So today we've got a lesson with the title Attacking an Unseen Poem, Brendan Gallagher. And our learning outcome will be to explore how a poet presents a conflict between imagination and reality through the use of contrast and a volta. There's a lot going on in that learning outcome, but the one thing that I think you may not know just at the moment is that word volta. Volta is a really useful idea that's going to come in handy in loads and loads of poems. This is simply a turn, a change, something different happening. So the definition I'll give you right now is the moment when you see a change in the poem. And this is relevant even in poems we've already been reading. So you might remember how in You Being Born, really nice little poem, long time ago now. In You Being Born, there was a change from chaos to order. Okay, that's an arrow there. So if we went back to that poem and looked really closely, we could find one line, one moment when there was a shift from chaos to order. That moment, that line, maybe even that one word, would be the volta. That would be the moment. Or if we went back to Brothers, you might remember it starts with this tone of the boastful elder brother, but it ends up quite different. It isn't triumphant or happy. I'm going to have to go on the next line when I say it's nostalgic. Regretful or sad. If we went back to that poem, we could find one line where we can see that change, that development, that movement from boastful to nostalgic. That moment would be our volta. We will see that in practice more today, I promise. As we go through this poem, Brendan Gallagher, I also just want to remind you of some of your versatile vocabulary, which you've been putting into action so well. Vocabulary. Always need to check that word twice for the spelling. So today's words, of course, are credulous and duplicitous. But also, we might bring in vulnerable and secure. We might also bring in permanent and ephemeral. I think we could also bring in tangible and intangible, and one more, internal, external. One more pair. And obviously you've learned more words than that, and I think all of the words you've used will be useful, but those may be especially useful. Okay, so you've had a chance to take a look at the poem and have a little read through. And before getting into some proper annotations, let's start you off with some warm-up questions just to check that your comprehension and understanding is where it should be and that we're starting to make sense out of it properly. So, first of all, let's just ask ourselves, which parts of Brendan Gallagher's backstory could be parts of the speaker's imagination? Speaker's imagination. And I think you can pause the video right now and decide on 3 simple things that you've spotted in the poem that's probably part of the speaker's imagination. So pause, copy that down, get your answers down too, please. Secondly, helping us get towards the volta, the turn or the change in the poem, what does the speaker's mum say that brings her back to reality? And I think there's maybe 2 things she says. If you can find a third, that'd be great, but I think if you've got 2, you've got everything I've seen. What does the speaker's mum say that brings her back to reality? So pause for a moment, get your answers down to that. And finally, for questions at this stage, I'm going to ask you a question similar or more or less identical to what you've been asked before about some poems. Excuse me. What's the difference between the first and last lines? I think this is quite a subtle question, but if you reflect on it for a moment, you will definitely get a great answer for us. I'm going to give you a little start just to help us off. You can start by saying, the first line suggests that, and then another sentence where you would say, by contrast, the last line suggests that. So these sentences will be simple and clear and communicate to us that you've understood the poem really, really well. So again, please pause the video for a minute or 2 so you can get that question down and get your answers down to it as well. Okay, so we want to get into some annotation of this poem, don't we, to really understand what's going on. So, we've got our poem here, and I'm planning on doing 4 quotations with you. Oh no, 3 quotations. But if you put a little underline and a star next to them, that will help make sure that we cover everything, or if we don't cover everything, you can go and do it at your own speed. So the first quotation I want to talk about is that one. He would hold my hand and take me by the river. Underline it, star it, mark it. Second quotation, one day when it was pouring and I was indoors. Second quotation. And the third quotation, 2 lines this time, and he died then, my Brendan Gallagher, flat out on my bedroom floor. And that's our third quotation. So just make a little mark on those 3 and we'll be fine. The other mark I might ask you to make, if you've got a copy of the poem, whether it's on your computer or not, is at this moment here. So that after the 3rd stanza, but before the 4th. At this point in the poem is where we get our volta. I'm going to put it in capitals because that's our new word today. That is the moment in the poem when we see that volta. Hopefully we'll understand that more once we have done our annotation. So let's get into some of these nice quotations. Let's start with this one. He would hold my hand and take me down by the river. Our first quotation. And that is actually a mistake where I've written a full stop. So let's get my green pen and correct that. There's no full stop there. He would take my hand, he would hold my hand and take me down by the river. And from that line, I'm going to draw attention to two particular bits. Holding my hand and taking me down by the river. Because I think those two are special, those are especially important. So, holding hands, that's something humans do, of all different ages. These two are maybe not quite holding hands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it is close enough. I'm not quite sure what has gone on with my arm there. They've got some kind of scar in it. Never mind. So there we are, holding hands. And I'd like you to think about a few things. First of all, why is it that people hold hands? Why do they do that? Can you think of 3 ideas for me, please? 1, 2, 3. Pause, think of that. Won't take long. Secondly, what feelings does holding hands create? Because I've been going at a bit of a pace, I've got a bit of a smudge there. So let me just rewrite that so we can clearly see it. What feelings does holding hands create? Can you think of 3 ideas? Maybe you can think of more than 3. That's absolutely fine. That's not a limited question. It's really, really open. And if we're going to really zoom in on a detail, I'd like to ask you about that word, hold. That's a verb, isn't it? Doing word. The verb hold shows, and let's have 3 ideas there. And I think we can expect some versatile vocabulary here, can't we? Versatile vocab if you're being very informal like me right now. So you might want to say, for example, the verb hold shows that the speaker feels secure with Brandon. I wonder what other bits of versatile vocabulary you could use. Maybe stuff like tangible, maybe constant, those kinds of words. I think I'll leave you to do that. Pause it, take a moment to do that properly, and then we'll move on. The other part from that first quotation that I wanted you to get into is the river, of course. And let's do this a little bit quicker. I think holding hands is the most important bit here, but river is also valuable because it will really help us get into the second part of the poem. So we need to see our river, we need to have it drawn out for us, otherwise we won't be able to imagine. Slightly skinny river. We're going to have a tree. We're going to have some flowers. And we're going to have the speaker of the poem standing there with Brendan Gallagher. Brendan Gallagher, not Brandon, as I said before. So there they are. And let's just put the sun up there shining just like it is at the moment. Set in Glasgow, so that's maybe a little bit unusual. And maybe I want to ask you some bigger questions here. First one, how is the river different to the city? The city with lots of houses and cars and roads and busyness. How is the river different to that? Pause, get some ideas down. Secondly, how does this natural environment underline that because it's important. Create a feeling of freedom. Create. So I think that's what they're getting at in this poem. The river is all about freedom. But why would you associate a river with freedom? How does it create that feeling of freedom? And thirdly, why is visiting the river, excuse me, written with W, not V, why is visiting the river an ephemeral experience? Ephemeral experience. And I think if we can get just one nice sentence out of you for that, that would be lovely. You'll remember, of course, ephemeral, the opposite of permanent. Something that's ephemeral goes by quite quickly, changes rapidly. So pause, get yourselves answers to those questions, and we'll move on. So the next quotation I want to work through is at this moment of the Volta. It's the line that signals something has changed. And that's this line. One day when it was pouring, and I was indoors. So we've got to imagine a really sort of different scene here. We've got the speaker's house here. Let's start with that. Little door. We're going to make it like a lot of houses in Manchester, Oldham, Glasgow, where it's just what you call a 2 up, 2 down. 2 rooms upstairs, 2 rooms downstairs. Downstairs in the window, I'm going to take my pencil and draw our narrator, our speaker in there. There they are, indoors. But it's not just one house, because of course they've got some neighbours. It's a terrace. So they might feel really cooped up inside with the road in front of them. Lots of people around, and then a horrible big rain cloud raining on down, pouring. I can do a better drawing than that, I think. So raining is something we all know about, we all can experience. So let's start with some questions about the rain. Number 1. How do you feel when it's heavily raining? And turn that around. When it's raining heavily, how do you feel when it's raining heavily outside? Give me 3 ideas. Number 2. Let's focus on that word pouring. The word pouring shows... What does it show? What does it tell us about the atmosphere of the day, about how free they are? Because we talked about freedom before. Let's think about what kind of imagination that might evoke in this person. And I'm going to skip to a slightly bigger question about being indoors. How does being indoors contrast with the river? Give me 3 ideas, please. You might be able to use your versatile vocabulary or some other words from your experience. Either way is fine. So pause to get those finished. Because we need to think in the last 2 or 3 minutes of this video about this extra important quotation from near the end of the poem, where the speaker says, "And he died there." He didn't die there, he died then. By Brendan Gallagher. Flat out on my bedroom floor. Okay, so that's quite an evocative scene. The idea of someone dying right in your bedroom. The imaginary friend has suddenly gone. That's what we mean by dying. It's actually not literally dead, but the imaginary friend has gone. Excuse me. Has gone. And suddenly. So, if we know that it's in their bedroom, we know we are going to see a bed. There's the bed. There's a little pillow. There's a duvet. There's some covers. There's the wall, so they're still inside, of course. There's a door that they might be able to get out, but they are inside for the moment. And here on the floor, poor old Brendan Gallagher with spiky hair. Drawn a little bit big there, but never mind. And because we're sad to see him go, we're going to give him a little gravestone to say, "Rest in peace, Brendan Gallagher." And I'd like to ask you about a word that's been really important all the way through the poem, actually. What does the word "my" show about the speaker's feelings? Speaker's feelings. I would love it if you get some ideas down about that for me, please. And I'm going to end with one last question. There's much more things we could say about this, but we are running out of time. I'm just going to go straight ahead because I think actually a lot of us are bright and clued into this really well. I'm going to ask you, how does this signal a change in the speaker's life? It certainly sounds like they've grown, they've gone from one phase of their life to another. maybe where they have to give up some of those intangible, imaginary things to face the tangible reality in front of them. We're going to leave it there for now, so go back to the lesson and we'll give you further instructions if we have got time. Thank you all very much.